First and foremost, Mr. Curtis Brooks from It's Not Rocket Science Coaching is here with us today. How are you doing today, Mr. Curtis Brooks?
Doing good, brother. Doing good, man. Doing good. Thanks for having me on your show, man. I really appreciate it, man. Really appreciate it. Glad to be
Not a
here.
problem, man. I've been seeing you, I guess it's been what, 4 or 5, maybe 6 years since we first met.
Yeah,
Our paths crossed, and I've really been seeing you, grow your channel. And not only grow yourself, but you're helping men to grow now. And
absolutely.
I think that's totally awesome, man. Can you give us a little background, a little backstory about yourself leading up to what you're doing now?
Yeah, absolutely, man. Absolutely. Again, thanks for having me, man. I appreciate the question, for sure. Yeah, for me, man, as an entrepreneur, and I think that you're just in that lane of trying to figure some stuff out, and just having to do your own homework, and for me, that homework, I had to just look within, if you will, and it meant that I had to ask myself some challenging questions and look at what I actually needed and what I would eventually would find in my own self to use to help do my part in changing the world or making the world a better place. And so for me, I found that in working with men. And I say that because for me, as a youth man, I was desperately looking for that father figure, and then I had to come to grips with that. That was that's what I was missing. And though I had a wonderful father, he was an absolutely excellent provider, stepfather, I should say. My biological father wasn't there, and I don't know even if that would have changed the situation. But for a young person, young man, that's what I was needing. That's what I was needing. And so throughout this journey called life, man, I found myself really just having to do the work myself, man. And, not without its share of challenges and struggles like most of us have dealt with in life, but just really having to just, again, do the work, man, and find the pain, the source of pain that was for me, and do the healing. And here I am, man, just found myself working with men and just having to help men communicate from their situations and come into healthy relationships because, you know, I was out there chasing skirts too, and doing what I'm a man, and so I was out there doing what I do, and yeah, man. So I went through those challenges, those struggles, man. But so here I am now, working with men and helping men to again communicate out of their situations into the healthy relationships that we all in need of, and that's what's going to help us blossom and I believe come into our purpose in life.
I totally agree with you, man. And I know for a fact that it is something that's needed. What you're doing is something that is needed for most men,
Mhm.
especially men in the Generation X age group. Um,
Absolutely.
there was a time when we were moving forward in life, and you can almost say that rappers were father figures.
Absolutely.
And I think, when you see that, I know that when you're on drugs or alcohol, it's a place called rock bottom. But to
Hmm.
me, what you kind of describe is a wall that you come to, a wall that you hit and said, hold up, man, something is missing, right?
Right.
Something is deeper. The alcohol is not getting it, the drugs is not getting it, the women are not getting it. It has
Hmm.
to be something deeper. So can you speak on that? Like, is there a wall, would you say, that men hit and finally start seeking help?
That's a great question, brother. Great question. To be honest, man, it absolutely to what you just said. I love that term, the wall, absolutely, and I've heard it used in different ways, but yeah, I love that term that you're using now as it relates to this conversation because that's exactly what you hit. And for me, it wasn't the drugs, it wasn't the alcohol, though I've been there. For me, it was the gambling at one time. It was the women. And none of that did it. But as just shared, but yeah, you absolutely will hit a wall. And I think that it doesn't matter what your vice is, though. It doesn't matter what your vice is, and be it the women, the drugs, the alcohol, the whatever the case might be. It doesn't matter what your vice is, you will hit a wall. And I think that wall has to do with just, again, that need that needs to be fulfilled, that emptiness, that if we're honest with ourselves, because life, man, life as it stands, it has us going and going and going, and trying to figure out stuff along the way, and not knowing that sometimes you gotta stop, you gotta slow down to figure it out. You're not going to be able to figure it out while you're running the street. And you don't even have to be running the street. You don't have to, you just not going to figure it out where you're going while you're driving down the street at 100 miles per hour.
Right.
You're not
Right.
going to figure it out that way. But I think, man, again, like you said, that hitting that wall, man, it's just lack of knowledge. We in our own strength, we can only go so far. When you don't know, you don't know.
Yeah.
And at some point, the information that we have, the information that we've known, be it right or wrong or dysfunctional as it may be, we've all had a part of this dysfunction called life. And not knowing the right things to do, or the right timing to do things, not necessarily it was a bad idea, but just sometimes the wrong timing. But nevertheless, we've all taken part of this thing called life, again, the dysfunction that it brings, and trying to figure things out. And I think that it's important for us to understand that we all come from that place, but with the limited information that we all have, the wall that you mentioned that we will run into, inevitable, no matter what you do, is the knowledge that keeps circulating in our own minds, within between these ears that we have here, going round and round and round, and us flipping that knowledge, that information, limited as it may be, us flipping that information over on its side, on the left side, the right side, turning it upside down, smashing it, pulling it out this way, and all these different ways that we're using that. We may try to look into the limited knowledge that we have. And at some point, the knowledge that we have, we exhaust it, if that makes any sense.
Right.
We exhausted information. So at some point, the exhaustion of that information, bro, it takes time for it's needed for us to be able to look outside the box, if you will, look outside the window, because at some point, depression is absolutely inevitable. The limited information that we all share in, because I only know as much as I know in my own strength. You only know as much as you know, but together, us having a conversation, I can look at life from a different perspective now. And I can add to what I didn't know, and eventually, hopefully, come out the box or the storm that I might be going through.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely, man. Listen, I think for the first time, I tuned into a television program.
Mm-hmm.
This is to add on to what you're saying.
Right.
I tuned into a television program about 2 weeks ago. The only reason I tuned into it, I'm a fan of nature shows, and things like that. And I tuned into it because that's what it was, what it showed. So as I began to watch it, the name of the show is called Alone. It's on the History Channel. It's called Alone. And the contestants are competing. It's 10 contestants. They're competing against each other for $500,000. They each get dropped off in a remote location that basically go through all 4 seasons. So, they go starting out when everything is fresh and they can pick as much food as they want to.
Right.
The fish are biting, the deers are out. So that's how it starts out. And So they like 10 miles away from each other, but they're all alone. Each one of them is alone.
Right.
So you have each season that they go through. And what happens is, as the season gets further and further, they have to be there for, I want to say, it's 100 and some days to win the money. As the season go further and further, then food starts becoming scarce.
Right. Right.
They can't eat as much as they want to.
Right,
so if they can't eat as much as they want to, they can't think as diligently as they used to.
Absolutely.
So what has happened is they are surrounded by bears, cougars, any prey that you can think of that can take them out. That doesn't bother them. They get to a point of starvation. That doesn't bother them. They still focused on the $500,000. They get to the point starvation causes depression.
Sure.
That doesn't bother them. What happens is every single man that's on this show, no matter how burly he is, you know, he's a fisherman, boat maker, has been in the bush, you know, 3-4 months out of the year.
Right.
When they get alone, every single man out there break down crying. All of them, every single last one of them. And the reason being is because the first time in their life, they have had to deal with themselves.
Well said, brother. Well said. That's good stuff.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
And when you think about it that way, building on to what you said, once you begin to sit down with yourself, you can reflect. You know, you're able to reflect and you're able to bring up some things that's going to be very difficult to bring up, but then you're able to work on it.
Yeah, absolutely, brother. Yeah, that's excellent, brother. I love that. I love that story and how you shared with. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, man. It was amazing. Like I'm on season number 4 now.
Where you watch it, what do you call it? What do you call it? You're watching it just several episodes or seasons at a time, or?
Yeah, I'm binge watching each episode.
Binge watching it. That's what I'm looking for. That's the word I was looking for.
Yeah, I'm binge watching it because when it started getting to the psychological part, I would have been done with it if it was just the nature part. But now that they're showing the psychological part of just like man and the way that men think, you know, and by man, I'm not necessarily just saying men, but men as a species.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah, man, it's kind of crazy because it also shows that we are all not destined to just be focused on money.
Yeah.
Right? Like they all went in thinking, I'm gonna win this $500,000. This is gonna be a breeze.
Right.
Well, by the time they look inward, they like, you know what? I'm going home to my family. Forget this $500,000, forget this reward.
Yes.
They cool within themselves. So they like,
Absolutely.
I don't even need $500,000 no more. So
Absolutely.
I think that's the awesome part. And I think that's where you, correct me if I'm wrong, but are leading men to.
Absolutely, brother. And I appreciate what you just shared. That's pretty awesome, man, because I think that's essentially what had taken place with me. You know, I've tried my hand in lots of different things as an entrepreneur, and some of the things I'm still doing, but some of them I had to let go. And I found that it just was not important. And part of, at that particular time in my life, I was chasing the money.
Right.
You know,
right.
And so it eventually brought me back to, man, where I needed to be, you know, where I needed to be and where where there's peace.
Yeah.
You know, that's what it brought me to. Yeah. So that's an excellent story, brother. I love how you shared it.
You ever heard the saying, like, people just like feel good, they're in a zone and they be like, I feel like $1 million.
Yeah.
So that's what Millionaire by Morning is about. People think that it's about making $1 million. No, it's about once we cannot function off of struggle, off of strife. You know what I mean? If you are trying to survive, then you can't thrive.
Absolutely.
So once you get that feeling of, man, I feel wonderful. I feel like
Mhm.
$1,000,000. If you
Right.
can wake up every morning feeling like that, hey, you a millionaire by morning. You know what
Absolutely.
I mean? So now you can
Absolutely.
really get to it. Whatever it is you
Yeah.
want in life, you put the rest of it behind you and you can get to it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, man, I had actually just finished doing a podcast. And so for me, part of getting into that space where I need to be at, excuse me, as opposed to where I was trying to get to. And, it's for me, anyways, I just finished a podcast entitled, I'm looking at my screen here, it's entitled Trauma, Its Effects and the Power to Renew Your Mind. And so I'm talking about trauma. And one of the things that I work with men is communicating. And the challenge with men a lot of times that they don't talk. And because they don't talk, or they obviously do talk, but because they don't communicate for those things that are really the essence of what they're dealing with, kind of what you were just talking about moments ago, in regards to we've been attracted to all these things, or that contest that you were talking about, similar to, I guess, Survivor, but now they're going for this $500,000. But after a while, and they're spending time with themselves, the food is gone, and all these things are diminishing. Now they have themselves to deal with, and until we deal with the things that are that have actually been those stumbling blocks, if you will, I would tell my wife at different times that, so it's interesting, man, that when we're around people, oftentimes we can find everybody to blame.
Yeah.
But when that crowd leaves, that audience leaves, or you can't put your issue off onto someone else. All you have is yourself. And I think the life of an entrepreneur, it absolutely will test you, test you on all levels, bro. It absolutely will. And I think especially as men, because naturally we want to take care of our families, bro. Naturally, we want to take care of our families and see our kids, our children healthy, and our grandchildren doing well, and just being who we are as men. And that obviously does not mean dominating our wives, or you know uh, making sure someone is submitted to us, and that's that ill regard. But I mean, it just essentially means us coming to who we are, dealing with our own situation. And I think men, and I think as men, we have such a huge responsibility, and it has nothing to do with all this other nonsense that's going out there, because I watch tons of videos out there, but it has nothing to do with any of that stuff, man. But it does have to do with our godly responsibility.
Right.
That's where it all leads to. And whether a person believes in God or not, there's a innate responsibility that's been given to men. And unless we take charge of that, it's hard to come into who you are, what your real purpose is,
I
because
want to stop you right there, Curtis,
hmm,
because I have an important question to ask with what you're talking about right now.
okay.
So there is a disconnect at this moment.
Mhm.
It's a disconnect that I don't think it's ever been before, which
Right,
is
right.
between parents, which is, I would say, Generation X,
Mhm.
to the new generation, in which the Generation X, they cannot relate at all as far as men. So, for instance, let's say you are a man and you're learning, you're getting over it, you're past that wall.
Mhm.
Well, you would like to relay that message to the younger generation.
Absolutely.
So how is that done when there's no common ground
Hmm.
between like Generation X, who the youngsters call the old school, and
Right.
the youngsters that are in tune with, if they want to watch something or figure out something, they go on to YouTube or they go on to TikTok,
Right.
but they're
Mhm.
not listening to the older man who has experienced it unless he's on TikTok.
Right, right,
You know
right,
what I'm saying? So
right.
how would you
Mm.
say is that gap fulfilled? How is that
Oh,
lesson to
man.
be taught?
That's a great question, bro. That's a great question. That's a really good question. I think for me, man, personally, and it's obvious going to differ how other people deal with these these things that you just mentioned. But I think for me, man, and what has been the challenge, and I'm finally coming around to it with greater understanding or greater depth to it, is that uh, I've had to retailer my message. I've had to come in from a different angle with my message, if you will, and at times I have to play the 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 goofy person or the clown, if you will, for lack of a better word, because ultimately, um, the message, no different from you and I, whatever God puts in your heart, the lessons that you learn, obviously, when those hard lessons that we've learned in life and those things that just, man, we've seen them repeated over and over and over, and now they just make sense. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. And obviously, we want to teach them to our kids and help other brothers and sisters as much as we can. And like you said, some of them won't listen. But I think that we have to, as men, we have to know who we are first. We have to know that we are not any different from that young person.
Yeah.
We have to know that we were that knucklehead who didn't want to listen.
We
Just
were
as
hard
stubborn
headed.
yeah, absolutely. Just as stubborn as we wanted to be.
Yeah, you're right.
You
You're
couldn't
right.
tell us nothing, especially if it was a girl involved,
Yeah. Go to
You
smelling
couldn't
that
tell us
tail.
nothing. Yeah, absolutely. And so I think that, man, again, that's a great question, man. But I think that we really have to, as teachers, you're no different from me as teachers, brother. And in your podcast here, you're teaching men, you're teaching people as a whole, as a teacher, bro. We have to be prepared to pull out all the stops. We have to be able to allow our lives to uh, we have to allow our lives to be used for a bigger, for greater message, for a greater understanding, and that know that, almost no different from how Christ laid his life down for us. We have to lay our lives down for those who will come after us, bro. And that sometimes we may risk looking uncool, but I'll be uncool for a moment because I know that you're going to get this message.
You know what? Now that you say it and you saying it out loud and I'm hearing it out loud, even with you mentioning this podcast, I'm recording it, going live on TikTok. So really, in a sense, we are doing our part. We are playing to them. So yeah, definitely. We just got to kind of get on their level, which is kind of the new technology and what we're doing. So.
And when you say get on their level, and it really is, just not too long ago, I was working with a LinkedIn coach, and she was saying, she wasn't just talking to me, but just talking to the group of other people who was involved with her class there. And she was saying, know your audience, know who's your target audience. And as I began to just drill down on certain things, and it's like, and just really think about some things, and I had an idea and all that stuff, but as I began to look closer and closer, and I said, what who would this man be that I was talking to? Blah, blah.
The avatar.
The avatar, exactly. And so, bro, I had this epiphany, and I said, wait a minute. I am them.
Yep.
I am that young person. I'm him. He's me.
Yeah.
And in most cases, we're dealing with the same thing. And it's just, again, our ages obviously are different, but it's kind of like a principle of a matter. How we get to something, it may be different, but the principle doesn't change.
Right. Yeah.
So it's that's just that epiphany that ran into. I was like, wow, this is absolutely awesome, man. So that really just kind of helped me in a tremendously, man, because now that means that, hey, I got to see the kid in me.
Yeah, definitely.
I got to see the kid in me and
can speak to the kid in you.
Absolutely. Well said, brother. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I totally get it, man. I totally get it. Because I know I wasn't trying to hear nothing. So now, like you say, as I'm trying to teach, I'm
Yeah,
really talking to the younger version of me. Like what would
absolutely.
interest me. Um,
Yeah.
and I was telling my son the other day
Mhm.
pretty much the same thing. He's
Right.
in school, and I know he don't like geography
Right.
and history,
Mhm.
but what I found out, I didn't like it either. But as
Mhm.
I got older, when I found out that those people was just as thuggish and harlots and it was really a
Absolutely.
gangster rap tale. When I
Yeah,
found that out, I got interested in the history. You know what I'm saying?
absolutely.
So if you
Yeah.
can, it's the
Mm.
presentation. It's all
Sure.
about the presentation, man.
Sure, sure, and that alone is interesting in what you said, man. Because I think, but yeah, like you said, it's all about the presentation. I think those explorers, those people of yesteryear, that came well before you and I had even thought about, bro. There was no dang on discipline. There was no discipline, and that's what we all, that's what we all need as men is discipline. That's probably one of the hardest things to come by for us as men. And I, probably get into that on another day, I guess. But the discipline is huge, bro, and oftentimes
Um,
that is hugely the huge part. That's what's really really missing for us as men. And when we don't have any discipline, man, it can. I'm trying not to go into it, but I guess I am. But when we don't
we're
have
gonna
any,
continue this conversation on another day because it's going to be a long. I see it's going to be a long,
yeah,
conversation.
absolutely, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Um. Okay, I'm gonna ask you this, and then we'll kind of get it wrapped up.
Okay.
Um. I can't think of the name of it, but it's a certain point that you mentioned history before us. I can't think of the name of it, but it's a certain point. It's called something
Mhm.
where in a man's life, when he turns 13, 15 years old, there's something that is done within, that culture that he becomes a man at that moment in
Rites of
time.
passage, is that do you, is
Rite
that you?
of passage.
Yeah, rites of
Yes. Do
passage.
you
Yeah.
think that's something that we're missing this day and age? The rite of passage?
Hmm. Man, that's a good question. Good question, brother. Um, I think the man, I would even go back to the very thing I just mentioned. I know we, at some point we'll discuss it later, but I think the rites of passage, man, is really as far as men. I think the rites of passage um, is really young brothers, young sons, having that role model, having the disciplinary that has been that's been absolutely needed. And I think part of that rites of passage is being able to not let your emotions get the best of you in life, and that without that, again, without that discipline, bro, something to almost like a something to guard us against being pulled out into a space that we're uncomfortable with until you actually begin to know thyself.
Right.
Part of that knowing thyself is knowing that emotional side of us.
Yeah.
And then that emotional side of us, and absolutely can, once we learn it, now we can be able to relate to women. So it's I know it's a lot going on there, but because oftentimes men don't know that emotional side, we are more prone to be logical thinkers, and because we're logical thinkers, we can overly simplify things, if you will.
Right.
And I know I've done it many times myself in regards to, and maybe watching someone else do something, and yet not realizing that this individual's been doing this thing for 10, 20 years, and looking at something now from my young eyes. Well, not so much now, but at the time, looking at something from my young eyes, it was more so about, again, trying to get to where they're at, but not knowing the steps that it would take, not knowing that there was an emotional pull on you, just life in itself. Having set a clear goal, because in our minds, again, being that logical thinker, we've looking at how someone else does something, we say, oh, well, that's easy.
Yeah. You know,
and we get the steps like this.
I
It's
know
a lot more
so
to it.
many with you saying that, not only I know so many people that went to the penitentiary, I
Mhm,
also know so many people that ended up dead
mhm, mhm.
because of what you just said.
Yeah,
And I'm not going to say we
yeah,
didn't want to take the time out to get what the 40-year-old man had worked for.
yeah,
We wanted it
absolutely.
right then,
Hmm.
because we looked at it
Absolutely.
in that sense. We wanted it
Mm,
right then.
right,
Not that he done went through the steps and he, been at his job for this many years and
right, right.
this is paid off so he can afford that. And,
Mhm.
you know, and unfortunately, there's just so many people that miss that growing opportunity, man,
Yeah,
as a young,
absolutely.
logical thinker that I can have that right now.
Yeah, absolutely, brother. Absolutely. And just real quick, I know we have to wrap it up, but just real quick, bro. Me personally, I'm being very honest with you, bro. Me personally, I was there, looking at life from that perspective, and how someone has been doing something and not knowing all the work that was involved in it, but whoever I was watching, they made it look so easy.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I didn't know they had been training day and night. You know,
Right.
I didn't know they were the Michael Jordan of their industry. You know what I'm saying? And so they have been training day and night with this. And I looked at it and seen it was, oh, they just do this. Oh man, and so this place in my life right now, bro, uh, I'm having to go back to school, essentially,
Yeah.
and get that consistency that comes with achieving whatever that goal is.
Right.
For me, it is working my craft and working with men, but being consistent with putting out deliverables out there.
Right.
Like working with you now on a podcast or on this, doing your podcast with you. And like I said earlier, I'm getting back into my own podcast, but being consistent with it, and eventually seeing the outcome. And so at some point, when I look at those other men and women alike who make it look so easy, I can clearly know that, hey, they put the work in, they deserve it. And now I need to put the work in. So understand that I can deserve what I'm working for, deserve what I
That's
have
right.
put the time in for.
And reap the rewards. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely, brother.
So I got a real quick, I'm going to give you these words and you can do a self explainer what they mean to you,
Hmm.
and we'll keep it short and sweet.
Okay.
There's going to be 6 of them. And the first one is going to be motivation.
So you want me to give just what comes to mind?
What comes to mind, like
Okay.
motivation, as far as whether you would tell someone else if you were to coach your men on it,
Right,
what
right,
it
right,
means to you and your
right.
program.
Right, 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 right. Yeah, for me, motivation is absolutely finding, and obviously, motivation can come from anywhere, but I would say find that internal motivation. There has to be an internal motivation that really sets the fire in us, and oftentimes it's studying others. It's studying others to get to light that fire, to light that internal motivation, and I think that when it comes from looking in the outside, what they call an external motivation, maybe getting a car, getting a house, and all those things that again that present us well, I guess. Uh, uh, those things can easily die off. They fall away. But until it's an internal motivation, something that wakes you up each morning, and where even if you feel like you're dragging yourself out the bed, you're thinking upon that thing. It could be that, hey, I was poor growing up, and I didn't like that feeling, and
Definitely.
so it's up to me to change that now. So yeah, I would definitely say internal motivation rather than an external motivation.
Okay, awesome, awesome. Well, that probably leads to the next one. Mentorship.
Mm. Yeah, man. Yeah, that's huge, man. Huge. I think even much to what we've been talking about, how or what I mentioned earlier in regards to how the limited information that we all have to some level, uh, we can only do so much with it. And in our limited understanding of it, or not having the understanding to keep going sometimes, because sometimes that information is exhausted. We exhaust that information, or at least that's what we may think. We exhaust that information. Mentorship helps us to look at that same information from a different perspective, rather than something that, oh, I'm just through, and I'll never become this, I'll never become this. You know, like God said to Moses, what do you have in your hand? So I think mentorship is absolutely something that can, where life can use someone who has the wisdom to ask us that very question: what do you have in your hand?
Awesome, awesome, man. All right, meditation.
Wow. Okay. Meditation, I would say, similar in ways to prayer, can absolutely help us to refocus, regain insight, and really just take time to look at the obstacles that sometimes that show up. You know, take time to self-reflect, look at ourselves, and oftentimes to look at how we may have responded to someone. Because in meditation, a lot of times the people that we may have interacted with that day come to mind in regards to whether we lied to them about something, whether we're dishonest about something. Meditation helps clear the path to the path or in the direction to where we're going. So it's absolutely essential to climbing that mountain, or get overcoming whatever is in our path.
Essential. I agree.
Mhm.
Okay, the next one, movement.
Movement.
Movement is that's like we would say exercising or traveling, things that
Mhm.
get you moving.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, so for movement, for me, in coaching men, or even whoever I may be talking with at different times, movement is progress. Movement is doing something, talking to having that self-talk. Say, hey, I'm going to get myself up. I'm going to, I'm responsible for changing the course of my life.